Hey guys, welcome to episode 5 of Operation PlayStation. I'm your host Dash. This week we've got quite a bit of news to talk about. It is the first show of 2023 and we've got some exciting stuff. The Resident Evil 4 has been on fire. The remake has been on fire, which is awesome. But the top headline for the day is E3. E3 is cancelled again. Once again, to nobody's surprise, E3 has been cancelled, and I'll have a bit to say about that. But it is the first show of the year, and I kind of want to address that a little bit. What happened was I was set to kind of do the show throughout the Christmas break and just continue it. A couple of things got in the way, and I had to pretty much set the show on a hiatus. But pretty much it's taken up to now to get it back on its feet. So it's great to be back once again this year and to do more PlayStation coverage, PlayStation-centric coverage on a podcast basis. So it's very, very cool. I can't wait to dive into what we've got today. It is a chock-a-block show full of news from E3 to Final Fantasy XVI, The Last of Us PC port, PSVR2, and a whole lot more. So before I begin, we've got some housekeeping to get through. So Resident Evil 4 review, thanks to Capcom, is up on the website right now. You can go ahead and check that out. Our Diablo 4 beta impressions are also up, thanks to the kind folk over at Blizzard ANZ. WWE 2K23 review is up, thanks to 2K ANZ. I did a Zelda Direct impressions, if for any Nintendo fans out there who is excited about Tears of the Kingdom, just like I am, you can go ahead and check that out. And I also wrote the Dash Game Top 5 PS4 games. It is the 10th anniversary of the PlayStation 4. Well, it's coming up to it this holiday season, so it's very exciting. Would love for you guys to go check out all that and more. But guys, if you didn't know, this is Operation PlayStation, dashgamer.com's dedicated PlayStation podcast, where we dive deep and dirty and discover the latest and greatest PlayStation has to offer. If you like what you hear today, make sure that you follow us over on Anchor, iTunes, Spotify. Give us those cheeky 5-star ratings. That sure help us out. Also, catch the VOD over on dashgamer.com. Now, let's not waste any time, guys. Today, it's going to be... there's going to be some news here that's... it's big today. It's a big one. So let's dive right into the news. The first bit of news comes by way of Rebecca Valentine over at IGN, who says E3 has been cancelled. And like I said, it's not. It comes to nobody's surprise at this point that E3 has been cancelled. This is like not a shock to the system at all. So the way that the industry has been evolving over time now, E3 has kind of become this stale old hat that just doesn't need to be it shouldn't really need to exist anymore. We have what is now pretty much a predominantly digital format for the press that goes out, and there's an intimate relationship between people who watch when they get a direct as in Nintendo Direct, but whether it be a Nintendo Direct, a PlayStation State of Play, or an Xbox Showcase, it's more of an intimate setting for people to digest information, and it's greater than what we kind of had. I mean, there's the glitz, the glamour, the fanfare of having, a live crowd at an event. There's an elation, there's elation there. There's that feeling of emotion when that adrenaline rush when you watch it and hear the cheers of the crowd and, get that ovation or get that response from them, whether they like it or not or whatever. That response is always a factor. But I think that now, post-COVID, where an industry is still feeling the effects monetarily, this is probably the best way to kind of shift, because we're going to be definitely talking about something revolving around that in a bit, which isn't great news, but it is a factor of what's happened in the world within the last couple of years and how we're still trying to move on from COVID 3 years after it. So let's go on into the article. Once again, this is from Rebecca Valentine. E3 has been cancelled. Almost a year after announcing its return, the Entertainment Software Association announced today to its members that this year's Electronic Entertainment Expo has been cancelled. IGN can confirm. Two sources have confirmed to IGN that the organization announced the cancellation via an email sent out to its members today. The email said that while E3, quote, remains beyond a beloved event and brand, end quote, that the 2023 version, quote, simply did not garner the sustained interest necessary to execute it in a way that would showcase the size, strength, and impact of our industry, end quote. The ESA concludes the email by reiterating its commitment to advocacy work. It does not mention undertaking the show again in future years. Following IGN's report, the ESA issued the following public statement from Kyle Marsden-Kish, Global VP of Gaming ReadPop. This was a difficult decision because of all the effort we and our partners put toward making this event happen. But we had to do what's right for the industry and what's right for E3. We appreciate and understand that interested companies wouldn't have payable demos ready or playable demos, I should say, ready, and that resourcing challenges made being at E3 this summer an obstacle they couldn't overcome. For those who did commit to E3 2023, we're sorry we can't put on the showcase you deserve and that you've come to expect from ReadPop's event experiences. Okay, so there is a little bit into this that hasn't really been talked about. One is that Xbox head of Xbox, Phil Spencer, has come out publicly on numerous occasions and has already expressed his displeasure with the way that ReadPop have kind of, organized events in the past. He really doesn't. He's not really a massive fan of the company. He's not really a massive fan of the organizers. In a way, I can't blame the guy. ReadPop have kind of had this reputation with PAX that hasn't really been the best. And it's not really one of those things right now that I think E3 is not a necessity. It's not necessarily something that is needed for the industry to propel gaming as a platform at all. People know about it. I mean, like, it's getting out there in a multitude of ways now. We're not necessarily, depending on just E3 now to get, garner mainstream attention. It's getting out there because, and I hate to say social media, but social media is a big part of it. But social media, YouTube, Twitch, whatever it may be, these companies are taking full advantage of the fact that they can digitize their showcases and present it to a worldwide audience. Now, whereas E3 started as a trade show back in the day for mainly press and also stockholders, stakeholders, investors. These are the numerous things that E3 was born through. But now, without it's not like stakeholders get their private meetings and calls where they get their information, and that's all they want. They want to know how much money they're going to be making. They could give a rat's ass about what video game is going to be out in the summer or whatever. They just want to know how much money they're going to be making, and that's the fact of it. We as gamers want to know what's happening in terms of video games. This makes the job easier to kind of segregate, profit, loss, and then entertainment, which is what we as gamers want out of the news, from these presentations. When E3 kind of transformed into, a showcase rather than it being a press event that was designed for, stakeholders and everything else, I think that it lost some of its charm, because what had necessarily happened was a lot of people weren't paying attention to it as they were. Like, for example, 2011 was a hot year for E3. It was a big year for E3, that's for sure. But I think that's partially to do with how hot some of the shows were and what it brought to it, right? I think that the one show that killed E3 in 2011 was actually Nintendo. I think they did the best job. at E3. But now it's kind of changed. It's not really kind of the showcase that it was. We now have, as an audience, that ability to kind of sway that that interest. We don't need we as an audience would rather be entertained directly with that direct approach again, with that digitized approach, than having to sit through a showcase that's kind of got a lot of fluff and filler, a lot of slideshows and bullshit attached to it. This is our quarter earnings. I mean, there was a lot of that early on. There was definitely a lot of that early on. I recall Reggie Fils-Aimé's first E3 comes up on stage, starts talking about the Nintendo DS, how revolutionary it will be, but how it would defeat PlayStation Portable. Why did I care about that? Like, whatever, man. For me, that's corporate talk. Keep that in the office. You don't need to really bring that out in front of the crowd. For him to come out, like, all right, fine, it was a badass moment that, people will remember, that he came up on stage and said, PlayStation were late to the party, that's their fault. I paraphrase. But that's basically what he said. It was basically like, tough nuts. We got ahead of them. So, there are moments, that we'll take away from E3 that'll be memorable forever. But honestly, when it comes to, is E3 a necessity these days? Hell no, it's not. Hell no, we don't need E3. It's become something that has more or less fueled memes across the internet. So there was a follow up to this, by the way, from the ESA, and I'm surprised at how they kind of handled this, but. This one also comes from Rebecca Valentine over at IGN, who says, ESA head blames E3 cancellation on wider industry challenges. Won't say if event will return. Following IGN's report earlier that E3 has been officially cancelled, GamesIndustry.biz has published an interview with ESA President and CEO Stanley Pierre-Louis, in which he was asked about what went wrong with the show and whether or not the show would return in the future. Though Pierre-Louis was fairly tight-lipped about the answers to these questions. When asked what went wrong with this year's show, Louis pointed to larger industry challenges that proved, quote, too large this amount, end quote. He goes on, quote, first, several companies have reported that the timeline for game development has been altered since the start of the COVID pandemic. Second, economic headwinds have caused several companies to reassess how they invest in large marketing events. And third, companies are starting to experiment with how to find the right balance between in-person events and digital marketing opportunities. End quote. Later in the interview, Pierre-Louis was asked if ESA members were no longer interested in the event, what E3 would look like if it continued, if E3 needed the three big platform holders to have any chance of success, and if E3 would return in 2024. Pierre-Louis did not provide any direct answers to any of these questions, though he did seem to deny that the communication was an issue in setting up E3 2023. He directly confirmed that the cancellation of E3 would not impact the ESA's advocacy work for the games industry. So that pretty much is the nail in the coffin. E3, they know. The ESA know. E3 is done. Like, it's done and dusted. It's not coming back. And if there was a chance that it's coming back, it won't be under the ESA. That's just how it is. They're probably going to look at that and see how they can make money off that and, be done with it. There was also, I don't have it on the list here of articles, that's my mistake, but there was a follow-up actually today that I posted on the Dash Gamer Instagram. If you haven't already, please go ahead and follow us over on Instagram. We post our news there, not necessarily on our website. We post it on our Instagram account. Just kind of like a quick way to kind of digest some news. So I posted today on the Instagram account, hot off the heels of an interesting day for ReedPop. Its company has announced the departure of founder and chief executive officer Lance Fensterman. Fensterman? I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. Or Fensterman. Lance Fensterman. Fensterman. It was announced earlier today that E3 2023 was cancelled, with many developers and publishers pulling it out of this year's show. A couple hours after the initial announcement, Fensterman took to ReedPop's website to release his statement that read, quote, "After 17 years building the best live and digital pop culture company in the world, it felt like the right time to start a new adventure," he tells Popverse. We've emerged really strongly from the pandemic and the difficult years that period included, and as we were positioned with a tremendous growth, I was ready to consider what the next chapter of my career could look like, and a very interesting opportunity arose that I'll share in due time. Today is about my wonderful time at ReedPop. Mike Kiskin, Group VP, will take over as interim president. So, okay. It's interesting timing that an hour after the announcement of E3's cancellation, ReedPop CEO would step down. I feel like there is a lot that went into this. There was probably some pressure, and there's going to be a lot of people that'll question this decision as well, and there will be a lot of denying. That's just from my perspective, at least. That's my opinion, prerogative, presumption, assumption, whatever. I feel like it's just getting to a point now. It's getting to a point now where E3 has kind of become really the butt of the joke, and it needs to kind of stop. It needs to stop. They need to consider now that, like, ReedPop organized PAX events. We didn't need another PAX event, and that's kind of what they were trying to do with E3. It was trying to become another PAX event. And to be quite honest, it's not like, that's not what fans want out of E3. So, as far as I'm concerned, I am ready for E3 to just be let go. I would rather Microsoft announce like their own, independent tent show, as they usually do. They do it over at Redmond. On an annual basis out of the Microsoft Theater, and it's a lot more of a showcase there independently than what it is attached to E3. I feel like they do an extraordinary job, like amazing. I love watching the Xbox showcases when they're live in person, all that stuff. I feel like they can really put on a good show. Whereas Nintendo, I prefer the directs. It's just weird, isn't it? But it's how it is. So I think the association with E3 has kind of hindered a lot of the industry, over the years. But now the fact that they know, like a lot of the industry and publishers know that they can do it themselves without the ESA, having to cut. It's almost like they're begging them in a way to be associated with this press event now. And, it's like, hey, you're going to come to E3 this year, you come here. And, Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo are just not having any of it because they know they don't need to, because it's an expenditure as well. It's a huge investment for them to go to E3 to sell their wares when they can do it for nothing, for nil. The only thing that, probably would be spending on is just time from, their headquarters. So it's there's an expenditure there to put on a showcase at E3 when they really don't need to. Even, having the space on the floor, putting up, promo material and everything else, there's a lot of that they probably look at and go, it's not worth the money or time. For a great example, I think that Nintendo are ready to move on from the Switch this year. Why would they want to, showcase one game that people are interested in, which would be Zelda? There's nothing else that they're bringing to the table this year. Why would Nintendo attend E3? So, even Sony, even PlayStation, they really don't have anything until, they announce something, which will probably be at a state of play during the Summer Games Fest, by the way, which is still continuing. Jeff Keighley was pretty savage on Twitter today about that, that's for sure. But they are continuing the Some Games Fest. Jeff Keighley announced today that will be continuing, and there will be a lineup there. And I fully expect all major publishers and developers to be a part of that, because it's a digital showcase that, Jeff kind of integrates indie developers with, so that they get the spotlight too. He's done it. Like, Jeff Keighley has really kind of shifted, made a paradigm shift to a focus on smaller companies during Summer Games Fest as a whole. So yeah, you'll have Nintendo, you'll have Microsoft, you'll have PlayStation, but you'll have the small developers that will be associated in it as one kind of showcase that Jeff will host on his own independently, but will integrate independent gaming into it because it helps sell it. It helps sell it without, like, Nintendo wouldn't put on their indie showcase during an E3 presentation. They'd be like, first party. The only time I remember Nintendo were doing third party was when they were in desperate times during the Wii U era, when they had Ubisoft come out on stage to talk about Zombie U. So, we are at that point that E3 is done, dusted, dead in the water, and it needs to go. So that's enough E3 news for today. We know it's gone. It's not happening this year. It's melancholic, but it's just, yeah, it's what it is now. So mercifully. The next one comes by way of Robert Ramsey over at Push Square, who says Final Fantasy XVI wouldn't be possible without PS5. Director blown away by the console. He says, it sounds like Final Fantasy XVI director Hiroshi Takai has been left thoroughly impressed by the PS5. In a new interview over at the PlayStation blog, Takai talks about the advantages of developing for Sony's current-gen console, and although this isn't the first time we've seen such praise, his answers shed a little more light on what the team could do with its PS5 exclusive. Quote, the two main things that struck me were the size of the memory and the speed of the SSD. I could probably argue that, honestly, the size of the memories, in terms of RAM, maybe. In terms of storage, needs more. I've worked with a lot of different hardware over the years, and many have failed to strike the right balance between capabilities of hardware and the size of memory, end quote. Takai explains, quote, however, the PS5 is different. It comes with enough memory installed to take full advantage of the hardware. So he's talking about RAM. So he continues, quote, as for the SSD, as we are building the game, I was simply blown away by how fast it was. Fair enough. Now, obviously, this is an interview on the platform's official blog, and it's coming from a guy who's been working on Sony-backed projects for years. Of course, it's going to be a positive. But Takai does go into some additional detail with regards to development. According to the director of Final Fantasy XVI, features some incredibly granular assets, both environmentally and with the character models. All of these assets are given depth with quality lighting effects. Quote, it's really resource intensive just to render these models on screen, and the lighting and shadow effects are layered on top of that. We're only able to do this thanks to the size of the PS5's memory, says Takai. Yeah. So, I mean, that's cool. To hear some praise from, necessarily somebody who's working closely with PlayStation on a title, but also, somebody who's also third party. Like, it's Square Enix at the end of the day. So, while he might be working closely with PlayStation, it's still Square Enix. It's still third party. And to get that kind of praise and not really kind of address other platforms associated, it says something. But the fact that, Final Fantasy has kind of been like, just treading on Xbox, doing well on PC, and also being like a PlayStation mainstay at the moment, it's awesome to see that they're still like dedicated to PlayStation and, the way that PlayStation are going with their infrastructure on the PS5. Whether there will be a Pro or not, will also kind of telling sign on development of future titles, future first party titles as well, and the power of the PlayStation 5, whether or not it's going to be enough for some games and all that stuff. it's going to be an interesting time because there are heavy rumors that there is a SKU being worked on right now for the PlayStation 5 Pro, or whatever they're going to be calling it. And whether or not, I think that if there will be a PS5 Pro, then there needs to be games that will sell it. Because right now the PS5 does just fine the way it is. I don't know if it's there's a necessity for a PS5 Pro right now, but if there will be, there needs to be games that push it to its limits as well. And I mean, there are plenty of games right now on PS5 that really showcase the hardware, extravagantly. So it's going to be, it'll be an interesting 12 months to see whether or not there will be a Pro model. I think that there might be a chance, given the fact that Nintendo are probably ready to announce the Switch Pro or whatever the hell they're working on next. I think that when it comes to Nintendo, they really kind of now are in a place where they may shift the market a little bit because they're ahead of generation in a way. While they're living in their own generation, they're still ahead of the generation. They are still, like, the Switch brought them back to competitive market, a competitive market. So, in a way, whether Nintendo do announce this new Switch, rumored to be announced later this year or not, I think that'll also indicate whether or not PlayStation are ready to announce their, hardware upgrade of the PlayStation 5. So there'll be some influence there for sure. This comes by way of Rebecca Smith over at PlayStation Lifestyle, who says, EA lays off around 750 employees as part of restructuring. So this is all part of, all these layoffs that are happening around the world at the moment. Like, big corporations are just laying off thousands of employees right now. And it looks like EA was no different to this. So the story reads, the end of financial year is looming, and EA has released an update on how they plan to move forward with their business next year. The bad news is that EA will be restructuring and there will be layoffs affecting, quote, approximately 6% of the workforce, which works out to around 750 employees. She says projects have seemingly been cancelled too. EA CEO Andrew Wilson explained that the publisher is, quote, moving away from projects that do not contribute to our strategy, reviewing our real estate footprint and restructuring some of our teams, end quote. Reading between the lines, it seems like some games may have been cancelled too, although nothing has been confirmed. Recent rumours claimed a single-player Apex Legends game has been cancelled, while mobile versions of Battlefield and Apex Legends were officially halted at the end of January. The future of the Madden franchise hinges entirely on Madden NFL 24, while servers are closing for some older Battlefield games. Employees from cancelled projects are likely the ones that find themselves part of the 750 EA layoffs. Colleagues that have been removed from projects will get the opportunity to, quote, transition onto other projects, but there will be layoffs where that isn't possible. While Wilson went on to say that they were treating the process with, quote, utmost care and respect, the sentiment fell a bit flat after he also stated that EA is, quote, operating from a position of strength, end quote, and, quote, our business is gaining momentum. It's sad. Very sad. 750 people are losing their jobs within the gaming industry right now. And, this again is part of the effects of COVID, the pandemic. It's, we're still feeling that, everywhere. And it's not just, EA. There are a whole bunch of companies within the industry, within tech industry, within many, many industries within, globally that are just, feeling really kind of just budgetary lows right now, and they can't afford a lot of what they pre-planned because they've lost millions. And that's sad for the workers, mainly people who really have put their lives into creating these games. And it sucks. It just really sucks that that's happened to EA. If you about a decade ago, EA was like ranked amongst some of the most hated companies in the world. That's kind of shifted now a little bit, but it for EA to actually be the one company to have to lay off workers now, especially when they were going so hard and so heavy on loot boxes at one point, to the point where they had the Disney CEO call up their CEO and say, "What the F is going on over there? We do not want loot boxes in our Star Wars games. Take them out now." I think there's definitely been a shift within the industry that's telling. So yeah, it's interesting time, that's for sure. This one is another upsetting one, to be honest, because I've actually been a fan of the hardware. This one comes by way of Liam Croft over at Push Square, who says the PSVR2 sales off to a slow start, new reports claim. He goes on, a new report from Takashi Mochizuki of Bloomberg claims that Sony's PSVR headsets are off to a slow start, with around 270,000 units shipped to consumers since late February 2023 launch. That is a low number. The data comes from research outlet IDC, with Francisco Geronimo of companies suggesting, quote, a price cut on the PSVR 2 will be needed to avoid a complete disaster, end quote. Sony is yet to share any official PSVR 2 sales data and has never made its sales projection public knowledge. The comments and report follow Sony having to officially deny claims made in two previous Mochizuki articles. The scribe suggested the platform holder was having trouble producing PS5 systems prior to its late 2020 launch, and then reported Sony had halved its PSVR sales estimates for the first quarter it spends on the market. Sony publicly denied both these claims, even insisting there was, quote, enthusiasm from PlayStation fans for the upcoming PSVR 2 launch. Okay, so while I'm a fan of the PSVR 2, I was not a fan of the PSVR 1. I thought that the first iteration of the hardware was very lackluster, it was poorly timed within the market as well, given the fact that there were so many other options available for fans who wanted to get, true VR experience. The HTC Vive was really, really hot at the time. Sony tried to capitalize that on a budget-friendly version of VR, and it was just a disaster. To be completely honest, it was a disaster. There was a fan base there, a dedicated fan base, but it felt very much like a PS Vita fan base. It was a very small market. Again, they're feeling the effects of that now in a response to it because, one, the PSVR 2 is quite expensive. We're talking more expensive than PlayStation 5 itself, whereas, consumers would rather purchase a PlayStation 5 first than a headset. And to be quite honest, you have to purchase the platform first before you buy the headset, or else you can't use it at all. So it's one of those things where you kind of look at that and go, that's... I'll buy the console because I want to play the game, but the VR headset is definitely not worth it because it's more expensive than the unit itself. That is where you go wrong at the beginning. To make prices competitive, against, Xbox, where they had announced their console price, and then PlayStation came out with their announced price, but then kind of said, we're going to make it more expensive after the pandemic because of, costs and manufacturing and chip shortages and all this other stuff. They really kind of shot themselves in the foot. They really did. They shot themselves in the foot with pricing on the PlayStation 5 being so low, and then coming out with the PlayStation VR 2 being so high. The PlayStation VR 1, as I would call it, as I would label it now, is not a great selling point for a follow-up iteration unless you have reasoning or anything that could necessarily kind of promise a quality promise a better quality experience, I should say. And it does. Look, I think the PSVR 2 is an excellent piece of kit. I think it's actually better than I have a Meta Quest 2. I bought it when it was known as Oculus Quest 2 before Facebook rebranded it. And when I had the Meta Quest 2, I thought that it was a great piece of kit because you can use it independently. You don't really need anything to use it. You can play games on it without having to use, a PC. But you could use a PC to play as well. And you could stream the game wirelessly from your PC to the headset. So I could be playing, if I wanted to play Beat Saber mods, I can do that from Steam to my Oculus or to my MetaQuest 2. Without any wires. It would do it. All I'd have to do is sync it up with the app on the computer and it would do that. That's fine. Fantastic piece of kit. But the immersion that you get from the PSVR 2 is, without a doubt, it's just excellent. The haptics and everything give you deep immersion. The haptics on the headset as well. For example, when you're playing Horizon, Call of the Mountain, and the first thing the first bit of the game is your character, your protagonist, getting blinded while he's arrested in a boat by two soldiers there. And when they unblind, when they take off the mask, the blindfold, you feel the brush of the blindfold across your forehead. Like, it's very authentic. And then, like, you can put your hand in the water and you feel the waves of the control. Like, it's almost, it mirrors the technology in this. In a way, I'd say more the headset than the controllers. The controllers feel a little bit more 3D audio that they use in like a Joy-Con. But the haptics in the adaptive triggers are there, which is really, really good. So it gives you a little bit more of an authentic feel when you get the recoil of, using a bow and arrow. There's a lot of that realism that you don't get in other headsets, and it's appreciated. It's definitely appreciated. I think that there's a misconception about PSVR 2 that it's it be on par with its first iteration, and I'm here to tell you that that is definitely not the case. If you haven't experienced it, I would highly advise you check out. Like, if a mate has it and you don't, go to your mate's place and check it out. I think you'd be sold. I think, if anything, you'd be sold over it. I mean, I can understand the cost of its nature not necessarily being attractive. It's definitely expensive. It's 100% expensive. But I think that, and as somebody who's pretty much critical of the first iteration, I was not a fan of the PSVR 1. I can understand where fans are coming from, kind of voting with their wallet in this case. But I think that this technology doesn't deserve the backlash that it's getting necessarily due to its forefather, I guess. So yeah, I think that it's an oversight if you're missing out on PSVR 2. Definitely an oversight from fans if you're missing out on it, especially if you're a PlayStation fan. If you're a PlayStation fan and you have a PS5 and you love PlayStation intellectual property, there's no question you should have a PSVR 2. It's awesome. It's an awesome piece of kit. The next one comes by way of Robert Ramsey over at Push Square. Now, this one kind of covers a little bit of what I was talking about before in terms of like the PS5 eventually getting a PS5 Pro, like we're getting a PS5 Pro model. So it kind of ties into it, I should say. So this one, once again comes from Robert Ramsey over Push Square. He says, Resident Evil 4 Remake on PS4 is why cross-gen needs to end. And it's funny, the thumbnail he's using here kind of represents what my PS4 was like. Even my PS4 Pro was like at the tail end of the life cycle. Looks like it's a launch model PS4 on fire, basically. It reads, the PS4 is coming up on its 10th birthday this year, and boy, is it starting to show. The aged hardware is being treated to blockbuster releases like Horizon Forbidden West and God of War Ragnarok, but outside of projects from Sony's own studios, it's becoming more and more obvious that developers need to cut the last-gen console loose. Resident Evil 4 is the last cross-gen title to be a bit of a mess on the PS4. While Digital Foundry points out that it's taken a fairly impressive effort to get the game running reasonably well on the last-gen machine, it does come with some significant downgrades like incredibly blurry texture work, long load times, and dodgy performance issues. The general reception to the PS4 version seems much more negative on forums like Reddit. However, users are posting reports of borderline unplayable combat scenarios that, thanks to tanking frame rates and distractingly blurred environmental assets, trying their best to ruin immersion. It's clear that Capcom had to cut a lot of corners to squeeze the remake onto such old hardware. It's a somewhat strange situation because Resident Evil 4 was originally billed as a current-gen exclusive. It was only several months after its reveal that Capcom confirmed the remake would also be in development for PlayStation 4, which did raise some eyebrows at the time. Okay, let's clarify something here. There were a few titles that were like that. I can't... What was the... anyway, there were a couple titles that did make the claim that they were next-gen exclusive, but at the time, they were still struggling to put PlayStation 5s on shelves. Not everybody would have been able to pick it up, and this is a sales strategy, more or less. This is a strategy for Capcom to put more copies of Resident Evil 4 on shelves, and not only that, it has a free upgrade on it. You know, if you own a PlayStation 5, you get the upgrade for free. So, in that strategy, what they tried to accomplish here was, hey, we know you don't have a PS5 just yet, but if you have a PS4, here is the game. Just know that it might not run as good on PS5, but at least you're getting a go. If you do get a PS5, just know that your disc, you'll still be able to use it, and you'll get the free upgrade. To me, that's fine, that's fair, whatever. They tried to expand sales in a way. They're a business. They tried to expand their sales. They wanted people to actually have a go at this game without any, impediments, basically, to access. So it's great that, they took that initiative. However, they failed to realize that the PS4 really, really, really is now just past its prime. Like, there are a lot of things that you can play on PS4 that are still great. I still think Infamous Second Son is one of the best, is one of the most polished video games of all time. I think there's an oversight on it, and I think it gets a bad rap because it's not, the mainline Infamous game. It doesn't have the original protagonist. I think a lot of people were just like, oh man, they really went the woke route, didn't they? It's like, well, shut up and play it, would you? It's a really good game. It is a really good game. But games that are now coming out with a little more, meat on the bone, can't necessarily be devoured by older hardware, and it's starting to show. Optimization really is struggling on older hardware. I think that the one piece of kit that necessarily can still it's the little engine that could, in a way, is the Xbox Series X. Sorry, no, Xbox One X. And that is the last piece of kit from previous generations that is still going strong and still can run a lot of games well. PS4 Pro is still doing okay, but the PS4 is just... If you still have a PS4, it's still a fine piece of hardware to run games on. Not new games, though. These new games that are coming out, it needs that horsepower. It needs that horsepower, and it demands it. Without it, it's going to run like shit. You should know this. So, I have Resident Evil 4 Remake, the demo. Okay, so the demo was installed on my Steam Deck. There is 10 minutes worth of footage up on dashgamer.com right now. It runs like arse. It really does not run that well. But that was before optimization. Resident Evil 4, I installed later on my Steam Deck, runs perfectly. That's post-optimization, post-patches. They knew that they needed to clean that game up. But they also knew that they had to clean that game up on current platforms. They're not going to be releasing 20 patches for PlayStation 4 anymore. That's just how it is. And there are no shortages of units anymore. It's widely available in stores now. If you have a PS4 and you have Resident Evil 4, expect it to be running like crap, you need to go get yourself a PS5 if you want to play it optimally. Or if you have a PC that can run it, get it on PC. It's just as good. My review of the game is actually on PC from PC, thanks to Turn Left. But it's on PC because my PC can run it. And it runs spectacularly. It runs just as smooth as it would on a PS5, if not better, actually. So it's just what it is. If you have a PS4, don't expect optimal gaming anymore. That's just what it is. You have a PS4, you're playing classics now. It's about to hit retro. You have to understand it's a 10-year-old console, released 2013. That thing is going to hit retro soon. The PS3 was retro during the PS4 generation. That's just how it is now. It quickly gets, retrocated. So, all right. The next one comes from Michael Harridans over at PSU, or PlayStation Universe, who says, The Last of Us Part 1 PC issues prompt response from Naughty Dog. We've heard your concerns. Now, yeah, this is another one that's... this is a little sad. So, full disclosure, I reached out to PlayStation to review The Last of Us Part 1 on PC. They weren't actually giving out codes for the game to review. They weren't doing it this time. And I had my concerns. I was like, okay, no review codes for The Last of Us on PC? Really? This is like a major release and you guys don't want any coverage? There was no coverage, no major publications, I should say. IGN, no review. GameSpot, no review. There were no reviews of the PC version of The Last of Us publicly available pre-launch, not even post-launch. That was a telling sign that it was being held back. And also a harrowing sign that it really needed work. It just needed work. And I think that they decided, they thought that it was going to be fine. But it's not. It's a broken mess. It is a broken mess. It's sad to say that, but I had a feeling. Especially with pre-launch, the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection was broken. I remember... actually, no. I take that back. It wasn't broken. It wasn't polished. It wasn't optimized correctly. I had a number of crashes, I should say. There was nothing wrong with the way the game looked or performed in terms of when it was actually running. But the crashes that I had, there was one too many. It froze quite a number of times on me. But after a patch, no crashes. And it was a gorgeous game to play. So, I had a feeling that Naughty Dog were kind of suffering a little bit with The Last of Us porting Part 1 to PC. And I guess this pretty much confirms it. Anyway, so the story reads, Naughty Dog has responded to players encountering issues with The Last of Us Part 1 on PC, revealing the studio is looking into the problems and actively working on patches to remedy the issues. As reported on PlayStation Universe, The Last of Us Part 1 has met with a lot of criticism since its launch earlier this week, with reports of crashing and general performances cited by players. Quote, The Last of Us Part 1 PC players, we've heard your concerns. This is the statement from Naughty Dog. The Last of Us Part 1 PC players, we've heard your concerns, and our team is actively investigating multiple issues you've reported. We will continue to update you, but our team is prioritizing updates and will address issues in upcoming patches. The Last of Us Part 1 was originally released on PS5 in September 2022 and brings a wealth of improvements to the original. Okay. So, again, Naughty Dog kind of, as great as the studio are, their legacy is just, they've established a legacy. They are held in high regard as one of the best video game developers of all time. But this is a momentous fuck up. It should have been delayed again. And I know it's, sometimes people go, again, but hey, people like to share that meme around with the Miyamoto quote. A good game, what was it? A rushed game is ruined forever. A good game is delayed forever. Whatever it is. Again, paraphrasing. I'll look it up so I can actually say it properly to you guys. Or else, here it is. A delay game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad. It's true. Miyamoto knows very well that that's the case because they've obviously suffered a couple of setbacks over at Nintendo. But now, if you're porting games from one platform to the other, but this is not necessarily, Naughty Dog on their own. This is, them. This is Sony Computer Entertainment also hiring, a third party, a third party or a closely associated party that, excuse me, ports, that port their games from PlayStation now over to PC. Like Bluepoint have done it for them. I'm pretty sure Bluepoint did the Uncharted games. I might be wrong about that. Hold on a second. Developer for PC. So for The Last of Us was done by Iron Galaxy. Did Iron Galaxy also do the Uncharted port? No, but they did Metro Prime Remastered. What the fuck? And that game was excellent. But they did do Uncharted. So they did do Uncharted, but they also did the Metro Prime Remaster. What the fuck? All right. But they also have done a couple of ports to Nintendo Switch were a bit of disaster. So like Overwatch wasn't that great. Spyro had a ton of issues. Diablo 3 was mixed, I guess. Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy was fine. It had frame rate issues, though. I'm talking about like some ports to Switch here. But anyway, point is, The Last of Us Part 1 on PC is a disaster. And it's a shame because I feel like this kind of bleeds into Naughty Dog's reputation when it shouldn't. It should really reflect on who was porting the game, and that was Iron Galaxy. And again, Iron Galaxy have that job of taking something that's not necessarily theirs, but actually translating it onto other hardware. And that can be a tough task when it's not necessarily yours to understand or even code or whatever. But you have to recode and readjust and rebuild it on a new platform, and it can be hard. It's hard work. But in a follow-up to this story, by the way, this one comes once again from PlayStation Universe. Michael Harridan's over there once again says Naughty Dog plans to continue developing games for both PC and PS5. In a quote from Naughty Dog, given to in a statement, by the way, they said, rest assured, PlayStation and PC players were already looking forward to sharing more, whether you prefer a DualSense controller or a keyboard and mouse. Developing for both platforms empowers us to incorporate lessons learned from either into the overall design of our games. Oh yeah. Anyway, sharing our stories and experiences on PS5 as well as PC is something that Naughty Dog has embraced and will continue to support moving forward. Basically, what they're saying is, yeah, you can expect The Last of Us Part 2 ported to PC sometime, as soon as we fix up what's going on with The Last of Us Part 1. Which is no surprise. I mean, gamers really want both titles on PC. If you're going to play one, you got to play the other as well. And I know that, a lot of people won't be too excited to play Part 2 because they're just whatever about it. I don't want to go into too much detail, but it kind of it's bullshit because Last of Us Part 2 is revolutionary, to be honest. I think it's one of the best video games I've ever played. Yeah, I think a lot of people are too harsh on it. I understand some of the story that isn't fleshed out, but I think people are still way too harsh on The Last of Us Part 2, but hey man, that's just my prerogative anyway. The last piece of news comes by way of PlayStation Lifestyle, actually. This one comes by way of Nicholas Tan over at PlayStation Lifestyle, who says, Silent Hill 2 Remake will upset people, says series writer. It's a weird one. Sam Barlow, the writer of prior Silent Hills games, is concerned that the Silent Hill 2 remake by Bloober Team cannot be done, quote, without upsetting people. Having worked on Silent Hill Origins and Silent Hill Shattered Memories, Barlow is actually excited to see how the developer will change and modernize the classic horror game, but he also believes that doing a remaster of it is like, quote, the biggest poison chalice in video games. I highly disagree, but anyway. Bloober Team said it would take, quote, a very safe approach to the Silent Hill 2 remake. Speaking with PC Games N at GDC 2023, Barlow believes that the Silent Hill 2 remake is a difficult task to fulfill. Quote, personally, I'm less excited to play... Personally, I'm less excited about playing a remaster. It's also like the biggest poison chalice in video games. Doing a remaster of Silent Hill 2. I mean, good luck to them, because I don't know how you can do that without upsetting people. Silent Hill 2 is definitely a classic that fans don't want altered in any major way, which is mainly the reason why Bloober Team stated in January that it would be playing things safe for the remaster. At the time, the developer said that it wants to, quote, remain faithful to the original title, end quote. That said, Barlow is excited that Konami is finally using the Silent Hill brand, quote, as a platform and to have a range of interesting psychological horror games, end quote. Look, I disagree with the fact that he said it's like the biggest poison chalice in video games. Resident Evil 4 proves that wrong. You know, that's just one franchise that proves it wrong. It is an extraordinary revisit to the such an established, a beloved horror series. Resident Evil Remake, the series from 2 to 4, has done a monumental job. Such a heralding, job. They manifested such an esteemed library once again by revisiting something that's already has a legacy behind it, and a reputation. So for the whole poisonous chalice, whatever it is, I disagree. I think that's just, there's some sour grapes somewhere there. I believe that there was no opportunity for some of the original team to be a part of it, and there's some sour grapes. That's how I read it. I feel like there's some jealousy. That's kind of how I read it. But I mean, it's two separate development teams. Again, when we're talking about who's doing the Resi remakes and now the Silent Hill remake, it remains to be seen how Konami have handled this. And we're talking about Konami here. I can't say any more than that, but we'll see. I mean, look, the rumored Metal Gear Solid remake would have been a better approach, in my opinion. But I guess that it is still too much of a. It still hurts. It still hurts even revisit that franchise after the Metal Gear Survive. What was the last Metal Gear game? That Metal Gear Survive. I was right. Okay, so it's Metal Gear Survive. I think that left a lot of there was a sour taste in a lot of mouths after that one. And rightfully so. After Metal Gear Solid 5 and Kojima's departure from Konami, I mean, why would Konami be so excited to pounce back on that IP? I think that they've benched Metal Gear forever. They've shelved that one forever. Like, I don't think that you're going to see Metal Gear. Well, not forever. I should say we're not going to see it for at least another decade. I think it's still too soon. There's a lot of hurt feelings there. There's a whole lot of hurt feelings between Konami. I think there's still people within Konami that respect Kojima's work enough not to touch it without him there. But I mean, they already did Metal Gear Survive in a way, so that's not Kojima doing that game. That's Konami trying to put out something, and they knew they failed. And in a way, they were like, it was like, well, it's not really our IP, and we did something that we didn't want to do. I feel like they tried to sell Kojima and Survive at one point and just didn't go well. And now they kind of cop the backlash of it all, deservedly. But in terms of remakes, again, Square Enix are doing Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy VII, one of the most beloved entries in that franchise, and they've done it justice. The remake is incredible. Love that game. Love it. And when Rebirth rolls around, holy shit, I can't wait. I cannot wait. They've projected 2023 for the Rebirth. I don't know if, I'm keeping my expectations low on that date because they've still got 16 coming out this year. But if it does land this year, oh, God, man, so good. So good. I just, cross my fingers that Konami are going to do Silent Hill justice. If not, then I won't be completely disappointed. I won't be completely disappointed in the fact that we got Resi, which has been remade, masterfully. So that's what it is. PlayStation. All right, guys, thanks to the kind folk over at Capcom, I had a chance to sit down and play Resident Evil 4 and review it. It is up on dashgamer.com right now for review. 2,500 words it took me to review that game. Holy shit. I spent like a day and a half writing up that one, actually. So I wrote half in one day, went back, played a little more, replayed a little more of the start of the campaign just to kind of give me a refresher. And oh God, man, it's just so good. Like Resident Evil Remake, the franchise now has kind of taken a life of its own. Resi 1 and like Resi 2 were my favorites back in the day. Resi 4, I skipped 3. So to play the remake instead of the original, one day I will play the original, but to play the remake was fantastic. Then when I skipped to 4, I was blown away. Like on GameCube playing Resi 4 as a kid, holy shit. It was my favorite. Like 1 and 2 were definitely my favorites on PlayStation. Like at the time, I was like, man, these games, it doesn't get any better, And of course, we also had, Dino Crisis and everything. But Resi was Resi, And it birthed the spin-off. It birthed Devil May Cry, you know what I mean? We really got spoiled from spin-offs of Resi. From Dino Crisis, Devil May Cry, all that stuff. I feel like without Resi, we wouldn't be having such a plethora of incredible survival horrors at the moment. It really pioneered the way, we kind of digest a lot of survival horror video gaming. And it really deserved to get the royal treatment, to just have a revisit of such extraordinarily polished classics that get polished again, get that reappraisal, get that revitalization that's needed to reintroduce the franchise to a newer audience. Because again, now we're like 2 decades later, almost 2 decades later, but players are now getting that chance to sit down, and when you're saying, when you sit there and you play Resi 4, there's a lot of people who've played the HD ports and all that stuff of Resi 4 from, the original. Hell, I watched somebody stream it last year, and it was still amazing to watch. It was still great to see. Still cheesy, there's still some jank in it and everything, but it was fun. It was so much fun. But shit, does it translate well into modern gaming? And they have done that spectacularly here. There is a lot of Resi 4, the original, that is in the remake, but there's a lot of changes. In terms of its campaign, its story, and everything else, they really, really, really did a great job in terms of making some changes that make it a necessity to play this version. You're not picking up Resident Evil 4, the remake, which is that necessarily, hey, let's just lift everything from the original and put it in here and polish it up and ship it. There is so much more to it, and there's a lot of story, there's a lot of plot twists in the remake that even fans, hardcore fans, devoted fans of the original will love. There will be some critiquing, yeah, sure, whatever. There's some changes made. I don't know if I like that or not. But I am here to tell you that the changes that are made make it so much more, like make it worth the risk of checking out whether or not it's worth, revisiting again. And the thing is, with the GameCube version of it, I feel like when I went back recently to try out the HD version on PC, which is necessarily the game. It's the GameCube. I call it the GameCube version because that's where it came out first, obviously. But the GameCube version now, honestly, while it's still great to play, you feel its age. So to actually sit back and experience the remake and how nice and polished and cinematically immersive it really is. Oh man. They have done such an amazing job on this game. I love it. I honestly think this is going to get Game of the Year. It's that good. It is really, really good. There are so many more IPs out there that are, going to be gunning for it. We've had such an extraordinary year already with games. But damn, Resident Evil does it again. From the remake of number 2, when people were just elated by its sheer quality, its original tellings in plot twists within the campaign that they've done again here in number 4. But this time, I just feel like there is this layer of polish that wasn't necessarily in the last 2 remakes. This really does feel almost like they've, again, an improvement over, there was an improvement. There was that layer of polish within number 2 and 3. But holy shit, does this kind of capitalize on that and make it even better? Those who love the original as well, we still get the same characters. Leon Kennedy, Ashley, Louise, or Louis Sarah, Salazar as well. You get everybody in this, and it's just such a phenomenal experience. I really think this is the pinnacle experience when we're talking about Resident Evil campaigns and narratives. I don't think it gets any better than number 4, personally. And I think that they've done just an extraordinary job. I gave it a 10 out of 10 on dashgamer.com because I think it deserves it. I really think the gameplay has been... There's such a monumentous shift in approach to how they've actually changed some of the gameplay aspects. Yeah, there are a couple things in it that I really kind of was like, God, here we go. I don't know if I like this, which was mainly the weapon degradation. I was like, oh my God, are they turning this into Breath of the Wild now? But I mean, to repair a weapon, that's fine. I mean, it makes a little. There's that limitation that makes it a little more real, or introduce a little more realism into it, which I respect. Then there's the up close and personal conversation that's had between characters. I love that because there's that calm before the storm vibe that happens. Cinematics that happen in between, certain events, cutscenes and everything, and you're kind of up close to some characters is just haunting. It's hauntingly beautiful, I'll put it that way. Looming characters that are just kind of evil beyond evil. And then you have Leon with his cheesy lines that make you laugh. But it's such a spectacle. It really was such a spectacle to play. I think that they've done a phenomenal job. Capcom have really hit it out of the park. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else more to kind of give it besides, 2 thumbs up. Really, Resident Evil 4 is phenomenal. I think it's really has a really good chance of becoming Game of the Year. I think there's going to be a new wave, a new generation of audiences that will play this and really appreciate Resi 4 for its campaign if they haven't experienced it already as it was. So this is really, really, really well done. So once again, huge thanks to Capcom for providing the review code. Go check out the full review right now on dashgamer.com. All right, guys, time for the drop. It is a slow week for releases on PlayStation, that's for sure. But let's get through them because there's not really many of them. Meet Your Maker is out on April 4th, so not even any releases until April 4th. On PS4 and PS5. Road 96 Miles Zero, out on April 4th again, PS4 and PS5. Curse of the Sea Rats, PS4 and PS5, April 6th. And Sherlock Holmes, The Awakened. I know there's an audience for that one. There's a lot of people who love the Sherlock Holmes games. So Sherlock Holmes, The Awakened on April 11th for PS4 and PS5. That is the drop. So it's a very dry, we're having a dry spell. PlayStation are having a definite dry spell at the moment. So yeah, time to jump into that backlog, or if you haven't already, pick up Resident Evil 4. Definitely should. Great game, great game. There's a lot of games out right now on PlayStation that fans should dive into. If you haven't already, God of War, Horizon, so many games out there right now on PlayStation 5 that you should definitely dive into. But if you want to get something that's current, I'd say Resident Evil 4 will kind of, satiate that bloodlust, if anything, if you're into horror games, that's for sure. Guys, if you didn't know, this has been Operation PlayStation-Gamer.com's dedicated PlayStation podcast, where we dive deep and dirty, discover what the latest and greatest PlayStation have to offer. If you like what you heard today, make sure that you follow us over on Anchor, Spotify, and iTunes. Give us those cheeky 5-star ratings, or Apple Podcasts. Surely help us out. Also, catch the VOD over on dashgamer.com. And if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe, hit that bell, give us a like, leave us a comment. Sorry, I almost said follow. Surely helps us out. Guys, I'll be back in another 2 weeks with episode 6 of Operation PlayStation. There will be a guest with me as well, which will be a lot of fun. But until then, this operation is complete.
dashgamer.com